There we are. Okay. Hine, behold, you do it is known. Masirut nefesh b'poel, that the Jews that had self-sacrifice, actually on Torah mitzvahs, and previously the Rebbe explained to us that that was really the point that God wanted to get over to the Jewish people when he gave the Torah, that they should all be like Abraham. All the Jewish people should be like Abraham, interested only in the truth and being willing to sacrifice for it. That's called Masirut Nefesh. What is the truth? Torah and the commandments. That the Masirut Nefesh actually on Torah and the commandments of all the Jewish people was on Purim. The first time it really happened that all the Jewish people in the history of the world, that all the Jewish people had self-sacrifice for Torah and commandments. Okay, first of all, for the history of the world, before the Jews got out of Egypt, there was basically no such thing as the Jewish people. In Egypt, they grew and they developed till they became the Jewish people, but they were just like fetuses. They had no consciousness. They weren't in the world. The Jewish people got really into the world. The birth of the Jewish people was when they got out of Egypt. They got out of Egypt about 2,448 years after the creation of the world. 2,400. It was about 1,000 years later was the miracle of Purim. That was after the first temple was destroyed. And that whole 1,000-year period, the Jews never really got the point of the Torah. Namely, what? You have to have self-sacrifice. The point of the Torah is that it's a way that you can really use your whole being to serve God. To not think about yourself. If you're not serving God, then you're serving yourself. So the first time the Jewish people really got this point that we're willing to sacrifice everything for the Creator was on Purim. B'zman Gezeirat Haman, at the time of the decree of Haman. Shemasirut Nefesh, the Chanukah, the Masirut self-sacrifice that they had in Chanukah, which was about 200 years later. B'zman Gezeirat Yavan. That was mainly B'matetyahu B'banav. The self-sacrifice that was on Chanukah, that at least began with Matasyahu and his sons, called the Maccabees. In those days, almost all the Jews, the Rebbe has a beautiful sikha where he explains, and he proves that almost all of the Jews were with the Greeks. Almost all of the Jews. They agreed with the Greeks. They were afraid of the Greeks. They joined with the Greeks. They identified with them. They enjoyed being like the Greeks. They became part of Greek culture and Greek thought and Greek philosophy and Greek this. And they were 100% homogenized with the Greeks. Stood up a handful of people. Rashi says there's when in the blessings that Yaakov gave to Levi. Levi says Barech Hashem Chelo. Says Yaakov's blessing was referring to the Chashmonaim, the Matasyahu and his sons. There was only 13 of them. He writes there was 13 Jews against tens of thousands of Greeks. And there was also tens of thousands of Jews they had to fight against, the Rebbe proves. So therefore, only a small amount of the Jews really were self-sacrificing for the Torah. The Masirut Nefesh b'Zman Gezeirat Haman, but the self-sacrifice of the Jews at the time of Haman, Hayata B'Kol Yisrael, was for all the Jews. Every single Jew. Babies, children, women, old people. Al Pizeh, according to this, Yesh Laber, we can explain Masha Muva B'Maimer, that what it says in the Maimer and the Midrash, that Mordechai was Shakul Bedoro, like Moshe Bedoro. It says that Mordechai in his generation, he was the Moses of his generation. He was equal to Moses. We'll see that the Rebbe will prove that in a way he was even better. Shagam says Pashtusa, that even though that this branch, the how do you say the example of Moses was in every generation, but it says in the Midrash that Mordechai specifically was equal in his generation like Moses in his generation. The leader of the Jewish people has to be a totally self-sacrificing person. He has to be very talented. He has to be very, like it says, Ish ala Ida, the Sheri Ruach Bo, in this week's portion where Moshe chooses Yehoshua to take his place, to be his successor. It says there has to be, the leader has to be very special. The Jewish people, he has to be a person that has a sense of every person's uniqueness, and he has to be a true leader, and he has to have no fear, and he has to be intelligent, he has to know what to do, and he has to know all the answers, and he has to know the whole Torah. But in addition to that, the main thing of the leader of the generation is that he's totally self-sacrificing, and he inspires this self-sacrifice in all of the Jews. And the real example of this was Mordechai. Mordechai in his generation, he was the one that was like Moses. For Yeshlomo, we can say Shamaylo to Mordechai, that the quality of Mordechai Yehudi was Shuha Yaroa Mehemna, that he was the faithful shepherd in his generation. You moved it over, so now the border of my screen overlaps the border of the mimer. But Dugmas Moshe, if you could move it over a little bit to the left, please. Make it smaller. I don't know. All right. Okay, good. No, there we go. That's good. Now the whole thing is within my screen. Thank you. He was the Raya Mehemna. He was the faithful shepherd, and like we learned before, he was the shepherd of faith. That faith in this case is talking about faith means an awareness of God, an awareness of the Creator. That he increased this awareness of all the Jewish people. He was a Raya Mehemna, shepherd of faith. But Dugmat Moshe, just like Moshe, that Rosh says he was the shepherd of faith in his generation, that he drew this feeling of reality to all of the Jewish people. In other words, he made Hashem more real. And when we say he made Hashem more real, it's like we talked about before. It's like, what do you want to say? Like cleaning people's glasses so that they see what really is there. People really see and they can feel that there's a creator, and the creator cares about us, and the creator gave the Torah, and the creator wants us to, created us in order that we should do what it says in the Torah. The Torah is the only will of God. Just to see, these are facts. Kamuvan, like it says, Gam Bezeh Shadoro Shal Moshe, that the generation of Moses, call on Sheador, all the people was called a Dor Deya. Have you ever heard that before? The generation of Moshe was called a Dor Deya, a generation of knowledge. Of, let's say Deya means awareness. Let's be even more awareness of the truth. The generation of Moses, they really saw what God is. They really saw, they felt, they understood that God is creating them, that God is creating the whole universe, that God cares about everything, that God gave the Torah, that God gives the Torah constantly, that the Torah is God's will and God's wisdom. There's nothing except for God. God creates all being. He creates the spiritual. And nevertheless, he's totally above and beyond the spiritual. Those are the spiritual creation. Everybody in the generation, they knew it. They knew it. But the problem is they didn't have self-sacrifice for it. They knew all these things, but they also felt themselves. Elisha but Moshe, this was revealed. This, that the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the faithful shepherd, or that rather he shepherded, he fed the faith of the Jewish people. This was revealed. Well, how? Al Yadei, by means of Shehim Shech, that he brought down, Dat Lakal Anshe Dora, that he brought down awareness. How do you say dat? A feeling of the truth, certainty. Dat means connection, connected to the truth. Like I explained a lot of times, right? If you get a check for $1 million and it doesn't have your name on it, so you can understand the whole thing, you can explain how the whole bank system works and everything. So, but you don't have dat, means that it's not yours. As soon as you have dat, you see your name on that check, then suddenly wow, this is mine, the money is mine. It's the same thing, dat, with God. You can explain what God is. You can have all these ideas about what God is, and you can see the miracles of God, but it's not relevant to me in my own personal life, right? God is just doing all these things so that, to free me, and he did big miracles, very nice. But now, I got to get on with my life. I got to do what I want. That means that a person feels that really God is really creating him, and that he's being created for a purpose. And that there's nothing except for God. There's not God and me. This is an antithesis to nature. A person feels himself. Dat means that you are not just attached to yourself, that you feel and you're certain I exist. A person feels certain, even more certain, that Hashem exists. That's called dat. This was revealed by Moshe, that he connected the Jews and they were aware and certain that God exists. But Mordechai, he inspired them in even a deeper way, self-sacrifice for the fact that God exists. Right? It's a big difference between appreciating God and having self-sacrifice. Appreciating God means that when something good happens, you attribute it to God. When things are going well, you're religious. Self-sacrifice means when nothing is going well, when everything is going wrong, and nevertheless you still believe and you still are self-sacrifice. That's called self-sacrifice. Yesh Lomer, we can say that we see the Jews throughout the generations, right? They've been hated and pursued and tortured and killed and murdered and raped and stolen from, and etc. And they still believe in God. Yesh Lomer, we can say the Al Yadesha Mevi Meimer. Why do they believe in God? Because they see there is nothing else. Not only that, they also see that God is good. And maybe God does things that we don't understand. But it doesn't mean that they're not good. The Al Yadesha Mevi B'Maimer, that's what it says in the Maimer, what it says in the Midrash, that Mordechai, that would, if it's possible not to do experiments or something, whatever is going on, because it just sort of breaks the whole train of thought. The Yesh Lomer, we can say the Al Yadesha Mevi B'Maimer, that the previous Rebbe brings in the Maimer. Now the page is not in the center, so now the left part of the page is cut off. I can't continue. Do you understand? The left part of the page is cut off. All right, this is very difficult. Is anybody controlling this or not? Okay, let me just read it from my book then. Please just leave the thing alone, just so that it stays there. Either that or just take it off totally. And I'll just read from my book, because it takes up so much time. I have to just reorient myself and try to find where I am. Okay, please. Leish Lomer, we can say that by means that it brings in the Mimer what it says in the Midrash that Mordechai in his generation was equal to Moshe in his generation. Okay, this we have to remember. This is a Mimer from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe that he said right in 1927. And in this Mimer, the previous Rebbe brings the Midrash that says that Mordechai in his generation, in Purim, the time of Purim, was the same thing as Moses in his generation. The fact that the previous Rebbe brings this, that there must be a Moses in every generation, Al Yedei Zeh, by means of this, Pasak Balamamer et Adin al Atzmo. By means of this, the previous Rebbe, who he wrote the Mimer, he is really announcing on himself. Shehu Araya Mehemna, that he is the faithful shepherd of all of the people in his generation. Now you have to understand something. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was like locked. Chabad in general was totally locked in Russia. They couldn't get out to the other Jews in the world. There were Jews spread out all over the world, but the Rebbes of Chabad cared about them, worried about them, prayed for them, did everything they could in order to have some sort of an influence on them, to strengthen them Torah mitzvahs, but they couldn't do anything. They were stuck in Russia. The previous Rebbe, he got out of Russia. He got out of Russia in 1927, a little bit after. But then he was stuck in Warsaw. Briefly, he did visit America. But the previous Rebbe, he was the first one of Chabad to get out of Russia. And when he got out of Russia, he had the ability, was opened up the door that there could be one Jewish leader that worried about and actively pursued influencing every Jew in the world to be self-sacrificing for Torah and the commandments. That's the goal. In the generation of the Lubavitcher, previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, there were a lot of very great rabbis, but each one of them had his own group. Each one of them had his own, what do they call it, enclave. None of them had any idea whatsoever, and none of them really wanted to affect all of the Jews in his generation. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, not only did he open up his doors, there were other institutions that opened up their doors. If you wanted to come in, you'd come, but who would come in? To actually go out and influence others, other Jews. And that's what he was saying. It was with tremendous self-sacrifice. That's why he was put into prison, because he refused to stop trying to influence Jews and strengthening Torah and mitzvahs in communist Russia. According to this Yeshiva Ohr, now we can explain the whole order of things in the Maimer Babira Pasuk when it says Ata Tetzaveh. Shebetechila, in the beginning, Mavor, the Perush, it explains what it says, Ve'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael, that you command the Jewish people. I think maybe I just had an idea. I mean, what are we talking about here? That Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses made all the Jewish people aware of what God is, and that how good God is, and how powerful God is, and how God gave the Torah, and God took them out of Egypt, and God loves them, God cares about them. But when the times got hard and difficult, then the Jewish people, they weren't ready for that. They weren't ready for self-sacrifice. Mordechai, he was the one that inspired all the Jews to self-sacrifice. What does it mean, self-sacrifice? That he made God real. In other words, everybody knew that there was God. The Jewish people knew that there was God. But they thought that God didn't have that there was, the Jews said that there's no such thing as God. That's a new invention of like the last 200-300 years. There's no such thing as a God that gives the Torah and that cares and takes the Jewish people out of Egypt. That's a new thing. That's Spinoza and these people. That's a new thing, right? The Mendelssohn, these guys. Right? God, there's such a thing as God, but he doesn't care about the world. He's not involved in the world. He can't give Torah. There's no commandments. There's no this. In other words, as soon as things get difficult, then forget it. Every man for himself. Mordechai was the first one to really do that. Mashiach is going to be a Jew that will bring this not only to the Jewish people, first to the Jews, but eventually to the whole world. That the whole world is going to really to be self-sacrificing. Right? But okay. Mashiach Mashiach is going to bring all the people. The problem is to recognize who this Mashiach is. So that's what the Rebbe is saying. The previous Rebbe, he was the Mashiach of his generation. Here it is. We have the check, but it's got a name on it. Now we see that this is real. We're talking about one man whose goal is to bring all mankind to be self-sacrificing, in other words, to forget about themselves and devote themselves purely to the truth, to make this world a beautiful, meaningful place. Alpis, according to this, in other words, to not only to defy nature, but to transform nature, to reveal the godliness in nature. Alpis, according to this, we can explain the attachment of the things in the Maimer. The Bir, a pasuk, when it says Ata Tetzaveh. In the beginning, the previous Rebbe explains what it means, Ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael. Namely what? That Moses, we said, Ata Tetzaveh means you command, but it also means you connect. Shemoshe hu makasher, that Moses is the one that attaches umachaber and joins the Jewish people with or Ein Sof, with the infinite light of God. Al Yadeh, by means of shehu zan umafarneset amuna, by means of this that he provides for the awareness, emuna, the faith, the awareness of God, which is latent in every Jew. Then after that, Mevoer explains, Shegam Roy Yisrael, that not only Moses, but the shepherds of the Jewish people in every generation, what's called the Ispashtusa, the representative of Moshe, the example of Moshe in every generation, Mechazkim et Emuna, they also strengthen the faith of the Jewish people. Ukamo, and the previous Rebbe brings, like Mordechai, Moshe and his generation. Shechizak et emunatam, that he strengthened the awareness of the Jewish people in God, lamod chazak, to the point where they were even willing to be self-sacrificing, to stand strong, belimud Torah and learning Torah and doing the commandments. That's step number 2 that the Rebbe explains, that there's a Moses, and then there's a Moses in every generation, like Mordechai. Step number 3, the Rebbe explains in his mimer back then in 1927. After this, Mevoer explains what it means, katit lemor, what it means crushed up. Please scroll down in the pasuk. Very good. Thank you very much. The ata tetzaveh, when it says crushed up, in that sentence that we started the mimer off with ata tetzaveh, shemedaber, we said ata tetzaveh means you, Moshe, connect the Jewish people, and you, Moshe, connect the Jewish people, that they should bring you crushed oil. What does it mean? Shezeh Moshe, that which the Jewish people reveals, or reveals the illuminator, the source of light in every Jew. This is mainly by means of what? Not Moses. We see that Moshe didn't do it. Exactly the opposite. We see from the Chumash that anytime there were difficulties, the Jewish people broke. They weren't able to be self-sacrificing. They couldn't bear anything that didn't fit their, their comfort zone. Therefore, Moshe connected the Jews to God, yes, but the one who really revealed the pure oil from the Jews, this was not Moses. These were the representatives of Moses in every generation, like Mordechai. She'oraru, that aroused in the Jewish people this power of self-sacrifice, that they believed, they were happy to serve God even when things were awful. Where did they get this from? The same thing with Abraham. Abraham took his son to sacrifice. It says in the Tanya, in Igeres HaKodesh, I think it's the 21st chapter, that Abraham, not that he took his son to sacrifice, he did it with joy. It was the worst thing in the world that could possibly happen to a human being, especially to a Jew. Especially to Abraham. He's such a beautiful son. And he was going to carry out Abraham's purpose in the world. And God said, sacrifice him. And he did it with happiness. The opposite of everything he wanted. That's called Mesirut Nefesh. That's called self-sacrifice. By means of this is the main revelation of the essence of the soul of every Jew. Says the Rebbe, we have to understand if this is really the main purpose of the Jewish people, and it can only be aroused by the representative of Moses, the Moses of every generation. According to what we said, in the Katit Lamor, this idea of being crushed up to reach the source of light, Shayech, is relevant to Ata Tetzavet Ben Israel, that you, Moses, connect the Jewish people to Hashem. That which Moses, and the Moses of every generation, Mekashrim, they join, Umechabrim, and they link up the Jewish people, they tie the Jewish people with God. Ubehakatuv, like it says, Katit Lamor, they have to be crushed. And this being crushed, this is a continuation of Behemshech le Vayikhu Elecha, Shemen Zayed Zach, take to you this pure oil. So first of all, Moses connects the Jewish people to God. And then there is a representative of Moses in every generation. There is one Moses in every generation, and he connects the Jewish people to God in a way of self-sacrifice, that this crushes them, self-sacrifice, and brings out this pure oil, the inyan vayikhu elecha, that the Jewish people should bring this oil to Moshe, means that the Jewish people, they bring, by the Jewish people revealing their essence, their pure oil, by being crushed. And why are they crushed? Because they're crushed by the exile. Moses gives them a job, a purpose. Without this purpose, they have no problems. There's no oil, they're not squeezed. No, they're fine. As soon as they have this purpose, and then there comes out opposition to this purpose, the whole world comes out against us, and ourselves, our own nature, comes out against us. And by a Jew defying this, that crushes, so to speak, his negative selfishness, that brings out this pure oil. And who does he give the oil to? To Moses, to Moshe. This adds, Tosfos Or, this adds an additional light into Moshe. Kamavur, like it's explained in chapter base of this mimer. Okay, so here you have to understand something. We're talking about this one man, Moshe, is standing literally against the whole world, including the Jews, including, right, all of history, past, present, and future. And in a way, he's standing even against his own self, even though that Moses is a totally transformed person. But he has to be a person that he himself has total self-sacrifice. He has no regard for himself whatsoever. That was like the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. No regard, only worrying about every single Jew. That's all he was worried about. That every Jew, as many Jews as possible, should realize what a Jew is. But when those Jews do realize, and when a person realizes that what a Jew is, and a person decides on his own to be self-sacrificing, this is, so to speak, not a thing that the Rebbe gave us. This is a thing that I myself do. A person has to make his own decision. Right? A person has to make his own decision to be self-sacrificing. True, the Rebbe shows us the truth. He shows us what our job is. He shows us how potentially good the world could be. But we have to make our own decision to do it. But once a person does make this decision, then he crushes, so to speak, his negativity. He crushes his selfishness. Then that reveals a light that gives more power to Moshe. And Moshe, if anybody in the world needs more power, it's Moshe. Because his job is never ending, and it's total, to transform the whole entire world. How many people are in the world? 8 million people. So here we have dealing with Jews that they can't even transform themselves. And Moshe not only transforms them, he causes them to also become transformed that the whole world, and that we're talking about here, what does this all revolve around? It revolves around free choice, that everyone makes the correct choice in life. And the choice has to be made constantly. It has to be made constantly because there's always challenges in the world. I remember there used to be these Eastern religions. Before I was religious, I was very into these things. And there's a thing, a person reaches a level, oh, he is now enlightened. That's it. You reached it and that's it. You're fixed. You're a different human. By Judaism, there's no such thing like this. Right? If you do reach some sort of level of enlightenment, it's only just to give you more power to fix up the world, to fix up what's around you, to improve the world around you, and by means of improving the world around you, then that accomplishment gives you more power and improves you. And then that, by you being more approved, you will get more and more responsibility to fix up the world. And the one who has the greatest responsibility of all, that's Moshe. And he needs as much power and inspiration. He needs it more than anybody else. And where does he get it from? When we do what we're supposed to, with Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, is that brings the pure olive oil, our self-sacrifice. That's the olive oil. That's this pure olive oil. By us being crushed, that gives power to Moshe. Behold, hakatuv, that what it says, v'kibala Yehudim et asher echil lasot. Listen to this. This, with the Jewish people, it says that the Jewish people accepted the Torah. Finally, after 1,000 years, the Torah was given. The first time they actually accepted it was in Purim. This sentence is referring to Zaman Achareya Nesta Purim. This is after the miracle of Purim. The Rebbe points out something very interesting here. What are we saying? The Jewish people stood against Haman. Again, how does Chabad explain what happened? Chabad explains the miracle of Purim different than everybody else. Chabad explains the miracle of Purim like this: that Haman made a decree to destroy, to eliminate, liquidate, hashmid, larog, labed, et kol Yehudim, taf anashim, right? Nar v'zakein, taf anashim, to destroy all of the Jews, women, children, youth, elders, to kill them all. He gave a free license to kill all the Jews. When was that license? It says that Haman threw lots was in the beginning of Nisan, the month of Nisan, and the lots came out on the 12th month. In other words, 12 months later, the month of Adar. 12 months later was a decree that all of the world could kill the Jews. Open game, season on the Jews. The Jews, I imagine, it was the same percentage of the population as now, like something like 1 out of every 500 people in the world was a Jew. Is that right? 1.01 or something like that percentage of the world are Jews. So maybe 1 out of every 2,000 people. I don't know. Anyway, the Jews were seriously outnumbered. They had no chance whatsoever. And when Haman was killed, which was almost immediately after he made this decree, and Achashverosh rescinded the decree, so he gave the Jews the permission to defend themselves. But he said, Gezerat HaMelech ein lahashiv. Achashverosh said, listen, okay, I realize Haman was a bad guy and that Esther is good and she's a Jew, but I made a decree. I can't go back on my decrees. The decree to kill all the Jews stands in its place. But what? I'll give the Jews permission, la'amod al nafsham. They can fight back. That's a big blessing, right? They can fight back. One person fighting against 500 people. You don't even see this in these kung fu movies. One person against 500. And it's not one person had a machine gun or an atom bomb or something. You had to stick every person individually with your sword, or you shoot them with your bows and arrows. They had bows and arrows too. You have 500 against 1, there's no chance. So the Jews, all of a sudden, Jews are smart people, and they said, hey, we got an easy way out. What's the easy way out? Look at the decree. It says to destroy, liquidate, and to eliminate all the Jews. Lashmid al-Kol Yehudim, all the Jews. Who is a Jew? They have no idea. These goyim, they don't know what a Jew is. we'll just say we're not Jews. Take the mezuzah off your door, right? Put up a picture of Haman or something on the Achashverosh on your wall, and just say I'm not a Jew. All you have to do is just for one day, right? The decree is to kill him for one day. After that day, they don't have any permission anymore. I don't know, maybe they did. Could be that they did. Maybe it's just from that day on, they could kill Jews. But in any case, so we just have to say we're not Jews until the whole thing dies down, and that's it. Easy way out. Just say you're not a Jew. What's the big deal? The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, writes in the book Torah Ohr, he said, not one Jew even thought to deny his Judaism. Not one Jew even thought, machshava chutz, it says, that not one Jew even thought to deny his Judaism. These same Jews that just a few months earlier, they were all dancing and eating in the meal of Achashverosh, and they had given up on the building of the temple, and they were willing to assimilate with the non-Jews. They figured that's it. There's no second temple is going to be built. Right, the 70 years of exile that were prophesied by what Jeremiah have gone, and that's it. Right, we're gonna we'll be like everybody else. It was a nice try. We thought based on English chosen people, but that's it. All the Jewish people gave up. All of a sudden, Haman came with his decree. Came along Mordechai and said, "Fellows, you're Jews. It's better to die like a Jew than to live like a not Jew, to deny your Judaism." And it worked. The Jewish people realized it's true. We're Jews. What did he convince them of? If you say that you're a Jew, it's only going to be trouble. They're going to kill you. But you're a Jew. You make your own free choice. Everybody said, oh, no, we're Jews. That's it. Are you a Jew or a non-Jew? I'm a Jew. Fool, to say you're not Jewish and you'll live. You want to live? Of course I want to live. So say you're not Jewish. I'm Jewish. Makes no sense. That was the self-sacrifice of the Jews that brought the revelation of the oil, the crushed oil, and that's when the Jews accepted the Torah for the first time with this self-sacrifice. Right? Wrong. What do you mean wrong? That sentence that says that the Jews accepted the Torah, that came after Haman was killed, after the miracle was finished, after the Jews won the battle, after the whole decree was over. That's when it says the Jews accepted the Torah. How? Well, there was no self-sacrifice after that, right? They didn't have any. The whole thing is self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice in the face of this terrible decree. Now the decree was over. That's when they accepted the Torah. That's what self-sacrifice was then. So the Rebbe said that was the big self-sacrifice. That's a self-sacrifice that we have to have now. That's a sacrifice that's demanded for us in our generation, when there's no Hitler and there's no Haman and there's no Stalin, right? Now the self-sacrifice is the little Hitler inside of us, the little Stalin inside of us, the little Haman inside of us, right? We'll see what that is, right? It's very clever. It's not coming to kill us. We'll see. We'll see 1 second. We have to crush ourselves. How are you going to crush yourself? That's crazy. Rabbi says, exactly right. That's exactly right. That's what I want from you. Because the Rebbe, he's the Moses of our generation. And he's going to tell us how we can crush ourselves now, after the decree is finished. There's no more the decrees on the Jews. There's no more Holocaust. Now we have to be crushed. It's now we have to, is the main time. It's not good enough just that you return, I'm going to be a Jew, I have Jewish identity, I put on tefillin. That's wonderful. That's great. But that's not it. Now is the time of the real self-sacrifice, the self-sacrifice that they aroused after the decree was finished. As we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.